I always thought the hardest part of growing old would be losing my independence. Turns out it's watching your own family throw away your dignity like yesterday's trash. My name is Judith Emerson. I'm 76 years old, a retired librarian, a mother, a stroke survivor. 2 years ago, I lost partial control of the left side of my body after collapsing in the church parking lot. I survived, but I wasn't the same. I needed help with dressing stairs, even meals. My speech slowed, but my mind never did. I was still sharp, just trapped in a weaker body. My daughter Lara insisted I move in with her and her husband Dean. At first, I was grateful. Their house was big, bright, and filled with family photos. Lara held my hand and said, "It's just until you're strong enough again, Mom." Dean, her husband, offered to convert the guest room downstairs for me, but it didn't take long for their smiles to fade. Lara worked long hours at the hospital. She was rarely home. Dean worked from home, an IT consultant, always typing, always on calls, and always annoyed by my presence. He stopped saying good morning, stopped helping me reach things, stopped pretending to care. Within weeks, I was eating cold meals alone, trying to wash with a damp cloth, and being scolded for moving too slowly. Dean would leave the TV on loud in the other room, but never let me hold the remote. If I dropped something, it stayed on the floor. "You need to stop expecting people to wait on you," he'd mutter. I bit my tongue. I didn't want to burden Lara with my complaints. She was already doing so much. But then she went on a week-long medical conference in Chicago. That's when things got worse. Dean didn't just ignore me anymore. He started mocking me outright. "You want help? You should have died with the stroke," he said once, laughing into his coffee. I sat there, frozen toast, untouched on my plate. I tried to tell myself he didn't mean it, but then he stopped feeding me altogether. For 2 days, I got nothing but tap water and silence. I banged my cane on the floor. I called his name. He didn't answer. He just played music louder. I was trapped in that room, smelling my own unwashed body, my stomach curling in on itself. I felt helpless, humiliated, but not defeated. On the third morning, I spotted something above the TV, something new, a small black circle, a smart speaker, and behind the plant shelf, tucked just behind the books, a home assistant hub. Dean was tech-savvy, but he'd forgotten the one rule of smart homes: they're always listening. And suddenly, I had a plan. Dean always thought I was slow, and physically he was right, but my mind still sharp as a blade. While he busied himself with conference calls and online poker, I sat in that dim corner of the living room, eyes fixed on the glowing ring of the smart speaker. It blinked when he gave voice commands. It listened when he spoke. And I remembered something Lara had once said during dinner, back when she still saw me as human. Everything's synced now. Dean has the whole house connected: speakers, cameras, cloud recordings, even facial recognition. He's obsessed with smart tech. At the time, I smiled politely. Now it was my secret weapon. That night, as Dean microwaved his dinner and ignored mine again, I tested it. I leaned toward the speaker and whispered, "Play news." It worked. A woman's voice crackled out reading headlines. Dean didn't even notice. I smiled. These devices listened, recorded, and archived everything, and I was going to give them something worth remembering. Over the next 2 days, I began speaking aloud when Dean left the room. "Dean Emerson withheld food for 48 hours, I said softly. Dean said he wished I had died. Dean told someone, let the cripple starve, because he had. The day before, I'd heard him on the phone pacing, frustrated, muttering curses. She just sits there like a corpse. I'm done feeding her. Let the cripple starve. He laughed after he said it. I didn't. The next morning, he came in, threw a packet of crackers on the floor, and said, "Fetch." I didn't move. I just stared at him, burned his face into my mind. I knew then what I would do. Lara was due back in 3 days. Dean had planned a welcome home dinner, family, friends, the whole scene. I waited for it like a soldier waits for a storm. In the meantime, I practiced using the voice commands on the speaker. Play recording, stop recording, sync with TV, quietly, secretly. Every whisper, a step towards something bigger. On the third night, as Dean slept, I made my way out of the room, crawling when I had to. I found his tablet unlocked on the kitchen counter. I accessed the smart home app and confirmed the system was linked to every speaker in the house and to the living room television. I smiled. Then I uploaded the audio files, my spoken reports, and most importantly, his words. Let the cripple starve. I renamed the playlist Welcome Home Laura, and I set it on a timed command play at 7:30 p.m., right when dessert would be served. Then I returned to my room. Dean never suspected a thing. He should have remembered I didn't just raise a daughter. I raised a woman who trusted me with everything, and I wasn't done fighting, not by a long shot. The day of the dinner arrived like a quiet storm. I could feel it in the way Dean buzzed around the house, polishing things he hadn't touched in months, yelling at the caterer on the phone, and even spraying air freshener near my room, as if the smell of his guilt could be masked by citrus mist. I sat quietly in my wheelchair, wearing a pale pink sweater Laura had bought me last Christmas. I hadn't worn it in months. I wanted her to see I still remembered the love behind the gift, even if everything else had crumbled since. At 6:45 p.m., guests began arriving. Laura came through the door around 7 hours, looking tired, but smiling until she saw me. Her face changed. Not shock, not warmth, something in between. Guilt, maybe, or confusion. "Hi, Mom," she said, hesitantly walking over. "You look nice." I nodded. My voice was too weak to speak loud, and I knew Dean had told her I'd been doing better. He hovered in the doorway like a man protecting a secret. Kissed her on the cheek. "Dinner's ready in a bit. Come say hi to everyone." She went, still glancing back at me. At 7:25, dessert was served, cheesecake her favorite. At 7:30, just as forks hit plates, the smart speaker in the living room lit up with a soft chime. Everyone turned. "Playlist Welcome Home Laura," it said calmly. Dean froze. Then my voice came through the TV. "This is Judith Emerson. I have been denied food and basic care for days." Chairs scraped. Laura turned pale. The next voice wasn't mine. It was Dean's. "She just sits there like a corpse. I'm done feeding her. Let the cripple starve." A gasp, a spoon clattered to the floor. Someone stood up. Did he just say that a woman whispered? The playback continued my quiet reports, his mockery, his laughter, each one like a dagger in the chest of every lie he'd ever told. Dean lunged for the remote, but I had hidden it. Laura stood up slowly, her face white. "Dean," she said, trembling, "is this real?" He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "You must have faked it. You know how these smart things glitch." But no one was listening to him anymore. Laura walked over to me, tears in her eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" I tried, I rasped. He wouldn't let me. That was the last word spoken in that room before the silence became unbearable. Laura didn't slap him. She didn't scream. She just turned around, picked up her phone, and called the police. Dean was still shouting when they let him out, still trying to twist the truth blame, the tech blame me. But the house had heard everything, and this time it spoke for me. They came for Dean within the hour. 2 officers, 1 male, 1 female, arrived at the front door, just as the last of the guests were leaving in stunned silence. The party had ended, not with applause or toasts, but with whispers, sideways glances, and one shared truth. They had witnessed something sickening, something unforgettable. Dean tried to argue. He even tried to smile. "This is all a misunderstanding," he said, with the same fake charm he used on everyone but me. "It's just old recordings, nothing verified, nothing proven." But the officers weren't there to debate philosophy. "We have probable cause," the woman officer said deadpan. The audio files were forwarded to the precinct with timestamps and device metadata. "You've been documented neglecting and psychologically abusing a dependent adult. You'll have your chance to speak in court." Laura didn't say a word. She just stood near me, her fingers clutching the edge of my wheelchair's handle. Dean was handcuffed on the porch. For once, he had nothing to say. After they left, Laura finally turned to me. "Mom, I didn't know. I swear I thought he told me you were adjusting. He said you wanted your space." I looked up at her. I never asked to starve. Her face crumpled. She knelt beside me, her forehead resting on my lap like she was a child again. Her voice cracked. "I'm so sorry I left you with a monster." I didn't respond right away. Forgiveness wasn't something I could give instantly, but the weight she carried now was heavier than anything I could place on her. The following days moved fast. Lara had Dean's name removed from all shared property. She filed for divorce. She testified on my behalf to the authorities, providing receipts, records, even camera footage she hadn't realized was still auto-syncing to her cloud account. Turns out Dean hadn't just been cruel. He'd been siphoning money from her accounts too. Jeremy, yes. Jeremy again was the one who helped me press charges. He was the lawyer I'd contacted during the earlier situation with my niece, and when I called his office again, he didn't hesitate. This time he said we go further. We filed for full criminal neglect, psychological abuse, and attempted elder endangerment. With the recordings, the smart home logs, and Lara's testimony, Dean didn't stand a chance. He took a plea deal, 5 years in prison, 2 years probation, registered in the elder abuse database for life. But more than justice, what I got back was something I didn't know I'd missed: control. I moved into an assisted living facility that let me decorate my own room. I chose lavender curtains and hung a framed print of my favorite Emily Dickinson poem. I dwell in possibility, because now I did. Lara visited every week, never missing a Sunday. We took walks. She brought cheesecake. She let me hold the remote. And in a strange way, I finally felt like a person again, not a burden, not a prisoner, but a woman who refused to stay silent. Time moves differently when you've survived cruelty. Some days pass like molasses, others like lightning. But in the weeks that followed Dean's arrest, every moment felt like healing. I began physical therapy again, small exercises with elastic bands, assisted walks down the corridor. The staff at Rose Hill Assisted Living were kind, real kindness, not the polished performative smile Dean used to wear. Here they saw me. They knew my name. They let me decide things for myself. Something as simple as choosing what I wanted for breakfast felt like a revolution. Lara kept coming always on Sundays. The first few visits were quiet. She still carried shame in her eyes, that invisible wound children suffer when they realize they failed the person who once wiped their nose and sang them lullabies. But we were mending slowly like a cracked teacup, lovingly glued back together. One afternoon she brought a brown paper bag. "Thought you might want this," she said. It was Dean's smart speaker, the very one that had changed everything. "I don't need it," she added, "but maybe you'd like a reminder that you won." I took it. I didn't plug it in, but I placed it on my bookshelf between 2 hardcovers, Jane Eyre and The Art of War, because sometimes justice is both survival and strategy. Dean, of course, tried to contact Lara. Letters, a voicemail through a mutual friend, but she never responded. She told me once, while adjusting my blanket, "He doesn't get a second act, not in my story, not in yours." And that meant more than any apology ever could. Meanwhile, the home invited me to speak at an awareness event about elder abuse. I agreed, though the idea of standing in front of strangers made me nervous. But when I did, and my wheelchair mic clipped to my cardigan, I told my story. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. I spoke of what it feels like to go unheard, to be called a burden, to be made invisible in the home your daughter promised would be safe. And I ended with this: sometimes your voice is all you have left, so sharpen it, save it, because one day it might be the only weapon you need. After the applause, an old woman with Parkinson's rolled over to me and whispered, "He starved me too, but now I believe I can speak." That was the moment I knew I hadn't just reclaimed my dignity. I had passed it on. Dean's name was never spoken in Rose Hill again. He faded into a file, a headline, a lesson. But me, I became something else. A warning, a witness, a woman who refused to be erased. Spring arrived with soft breezes and blooming lilacs outside my window. I'd survived winter, not just the season, but the one that had settled into my soul, when I thought I'd never be more than someone's forgotten burden. Now every breeze felt like proof. I had outlived the cruelty. I had outlasted Dean. One Sunday, Lara wheeled me out into the garden, a thermos of coffee between us. She sat on the bench beside my chair and said quietly, "I put the house on the market." I turned to her. "You're sure?" She nodded. "I can't live in a place that suffocated you. Every room feels like a lie." I placed a hand over hers. It was warm, steady, not like mine, which still trembled from nerve damage. But somehow the two hands fit together perfectly, like old pages sewn into a new binding. "I'm proud of you," I said. She smiled, tears rising but not falling. "I should have protected you." "You did," I said. "Eventually, that's more than most." That week, the foundation at Rose Hill asked if I'd consider mentoring new residents, especially those who came in from abusive situations. I said yes. Not out of obligation, but because I remembered what it felt like to be voiceless, invisible, starving not just for food, but for human connection. Dean wrote a letter to me from prison. It was short, apologetic in theory, but hollow in truth. He blamed the stress, the financial strain, the pressure of being a caretaker. But never once did he write, "I was cruel. I am sorry." I didn't reply. Instead, I tore it in half and used the pieces as bookmarks in my favorite book, Little Women. Fitting, I thought. A story of women who endure, rise, and forgive but never forget. I watched Lara thrive again. She sold the house, moved into a modest condo downtown, and volunteered at an elder outreach program. On my birthday, she brought balloons and lemon cake and told me, "Your voice saved me too, Mom." And it hit me. My greatest victory wasn't Dean's downfall. It was that my silence didn't become my story. That I had one final trick and I used it. That I'd turned their house of cruelty into an echo chamber of truth. Now I sit every evening by the window, reading and sipping tea. Sometimes I glance at the little smart speaker on my shelf, the one that once listened as my suffering bloomed in the dark. It doesn't speak anymore, but it reminds me I did, and that was enough. If there's one lesson I want to pass on, it's this: your silence does not protect you. When I believed no one was listening, I nearly let despair swallow me. But I found my voice shaky, quiet, and trembling, and it saved my life. Sometimes justice doesn't come with a courtroom or a headline. Sometimes it starts with a whisper into a machine, a message left behind, a single brave moment when you say, "This is wrong." To those of you living with illness, disability, or the helplessness of aging, please hear me. You are not a burden. You are still worthy of respect, dignity, and love. If someone strips that from you, don't suffer in silence. Record it, report it, tell someone. Your life is still yours. And to those who care for others, do it with love, or don't do it at all. Because one day the story you write with your actions might be read out loud,